Welcome to FounderLine, the show where we answer your questions about startups. I'm your host, Joe Beninato. Thanks for joining us today. It is great to have you all with us. FounderLine is all about helping people with their startups. You might be someone who's thinking about starting a company and you want to ask a question about what it might be like. You might have already started a company and you're encountering a situation in your company that you want to ask some questions about. You might be an employee who's thinking about joining a startup and you want to ask something about what life in a startup is really like. In any of those cases, we're here to try and help you. This is a live show, and so that means we're available to take your questions right now. So the best ways to reach us are via email. Our email address is help@founderline.com, and you can also reach us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @founderline. With that, let's get started. Our guest today is Satish Dharmaraj, who's a partner at Redpoint Ventures. Satish was a founder and early executive at OneBox and Zimbra, and is now an investor in a bunch of great companies, including Sonos, Coin, Nextdoor, and Pure Storage. Satish, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's great having you here today. I know how busy you are, so really appreciate you taking the time. I thought we could start out just with a few questions on your background.
Yeah.
So you started out way back when as an engineer. I don't know how many years ago it was now, but we won't count.
Are you trying to find out what my real age is?
Yeah.
We I take off my hair so I can hide my age.
That's right. And you know, we've seen a ton of changes over the years in technology stacks and what's going on with startups. And maybe you can talk about how that has evolved from the time when you were, a young coding to now when you see these companies.
It's interesting that you say that because I was primarily involved in the shift to the Java platform back in the mid '90s. I worked for James Gosling and the Java team at Sun Microsystems. We were 20 people in Palo Alto. Then we moved to Cupertino, and later on we were called JavaSoft, and and I actually was the guy who wrote the Java servlets and Java server pages, and the team behind that.
Cool.
So, if I were to think about the biggest shift, well, first, languages, obviously, a lot has changed. We thought it was a big leap to go towards Java, and it was, but, now there's do it in Go and Python and what have you.
Yep.
But the bigger shift, I think, is the change in open source and the amount of code that you have to write in order to get a system up and running is so much smaller than it used to be even 5 years ago, 10 years ago, for sure. Back when I was coding, you got to write everything, and now there's a library for everything, and you just have to call the APIs, and just your code is tighter and smaller, and you're only focused on what you're doing. So that's a great thing.
Yeah, and it means companies can get to market so much faster than.
That's right. Cheaper and faster, and yeah.
Yeah, I remember the days when we used to have to buy all these Sun servers and Oracle databases.
Yeah.
And the first $3 million is going to hardware and databases, right? So that's a different world. So about 6 years ago, you made the transition over to venture capital, and they say it takes 7 to 10 years to figure out if you're any good at it. So maybe you don't know yet, but what have you learned in your time since you've switched over to the dark side? What do you think you've learned in that time?
Well, I think you learn a lot about yourself. Venture capital is a lot about conviction, about whether you can follow your gut more than anything else, especially in the early stages where there's not a lot of data that you can rely on. So it's not like, you can look at a company's revenue trajectory or, So that's why it's mostly a people business, and it remains a people business in the early stages. And so one of the things, back when, and now it's a different time, but back when I joined venture, which was in early 2009, there were still not too many operators and entrepreneurs who were going into venture capital.
Right.
And there was famously a pool whether or not I would last in venture capital for more than a year.
Inside of Redpoint or in general?
the Zimbra employees and other investors and
That is awesome.
VCs who knew me.
Wow.
They were like, "There's
so what
no."
was the over/under on?
I think it was way. Everyone thought that I wouldn't last for more than a year in venture.
Wow.
Well, curiously, if you have ADD, which I do, then actually venture is a good thing because you're doing too many different things. Every day you're looking at 3 new deals, helping 2 different companies at different stages do different things, and then your day goes by. And I think for me, I learned that was something that personally that was fun. And then the second thing I learned was, there was no way I could personally keep up with everything that's going on in tech unless I hang out with the younger generation of entrepreneurs who are actually living and breathing and inventing it. And for an old guy like me, no, I'm saying compared to like what's going on, the tech business is just so fast and everything is changing so fast. And for me to keep a good tap on it, I think I really like where I sit in the ecosystem because I see all the innovation as it happens, and honestly, there's nothing that keeps you younger than that in the tech business. It's like in your personal life, you want to have children, right, to grow.
Yep. Keep you young.
Yeah, to keep you young. So, yeah.
It's the same sort of thing. Do you miss the
operating role?
There's nothing like being inside of a startup that is doing well, and of course you have ups and downs, and there are really horrible days. But there's a rush that comes with this is going to make it, and you don't get that same you're like one step removed from that in the VC role. So
there are two differences, right? The first one is one of control, where when you're running a company, the buck stops with you, right? And you have complete control over all the decisions. And if the company succeeds or fails, it's on you, and you create the product strategy and the market strategy and all of that stuff. And as a VC, it's the opposite, which is you have no control, right? People think that VCs have control or a board has control, and sometimes they do, but for the most part, good boards and good VCs, you don't have control, You have influence, and you probably trying to influence the entrepreneur, sometimes maybe wrongly so, towards what you think is the right thing.
Right.
But you have no control. And the rush comes from the control of just, and the responsibility that comes from that. And then the second thing is the economics. Go back to one thing that you said. The economics, what I was thinking about, if you're part of a really, really successful startup, then, the founder CEO is making a lot of money. VCs, obviously, there's a lot of money in the VC land as well, but it's generally termed as a get-rich-slowly kind of business. That's why you talked about the 7 to 10 years earlier, and that's all true because you want to be investing in companies, and those companies have to mature, and you got to have
diversified
portfolio. So it's more guaranteed than, well, if you're doing your business well, it's more guaranteed money if you have a diversified portfolio versus like putting all your eggs in one basket and going for it.
But if it hits, your payday is huge, big. Right?
The one thing that you said earlier that I want to go back to is, if you're part of a winning company, then the rush is superb. But the probability that that'll happen, it's a lot of, no matter how or what anyone says to you, I think there's a lot of luck involved.
Absolutely.
In running a successful company.
Yep.
And, I've been fortunate to be part of a couple, but unless you have a winning company, the rush is not a good rush.
Yeah. It's a downward rush
it's
frequently.
A downward rush.
So, I hear you. It is interesting though. I in recent years have become more convinced that the role that luck and market plays as opposed to team and product necessarily. I think you have to have a team and product. But if you start out in a small market, odds of it being a big success are relatively low. So
team and product are necessary, but not sufficient condition.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Totally agree. So, in looking at the sorts of companies you work with, they can't really pigeonhole you as the something guy, right? You've done consumer hardware with Sonos.
Yeah.
You're doing pure storage. You've got Nextdoor, so consumer internet, right?
Yeah.
So you're kind of all over the map. Is this the part of this ADD syndrome?
Yeah, it's part of the ADD syndrome. Really, I mean, one of the things that when in the VC business, one of the things that I'm lucky to come in with is, One Box was a consumer company, and Zimbra was straddled between enterprise and consumer. And then I had, because of my Java background, a lot of enterprise software knowledge, and so I'm intellectually curious about, hard computer science problems like a pure storage, and a MapR, but also, socially, the people that I hang out with and the way I think in my own personality is veers me towards the Sonoses and the Nextdoors of the world. And so whenever I see good people coming up with interesting ideas, then I get interested. So I don't, and that's pretty atypical for a VC. I think most VCs pick an area and then pick projects in that area and create a map of that area and know all the companies in the area. And maybe it's to my disadvantage that I don't have that, but on the other hand, I like the fact that I have, one day I can worry about consumer, another day I can worry about enterprise.
Yeah, it's good diversity. Huh?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, why don't we see if we can help some people out? So we're going to take some questions from the crowd. Remember, if you want to reach us, you can email us to help@founderline.com, or you can tweet to @founderline. So let's start off with a question from Michael in San Jose. It's actually about Zimbra. So Zimbra was quite ahead of its time, integrating both cloud and mobile when mobile was still young and the cloud didn't really exist yet. What was the process for coming up with the product? How did you describe Zimbra when pitching it to VCs? What advice do you have for a new startup trying to describe their product, which is still being defined? So somebody did their homework on you.
No, I know that's a pretty good question.
And talk about what Zimbra was for those who don't know.
Zimbra was a reimagination of work email on the web browser. So Zimbra was conceived and pitched to VCs and raised its capital before Gmail came online.
Okay.
But it was the principles of Ajax, which basically is a way to make a web browser so rich that you don't miss your desktop application. So you don't miss your Outlook. Your webmail is so much better than your Outlook.
Got it.
Which it was the case back when we were thinking about, I was working at OpenWave, and we had Exchange and Outlook, and then we were on Yahoo Mail back then, and the webmail was so much better and easier to use than Outlook. And I was thinking of bridging, taking consumer tech and bringing it to the enterprise, and that was the genesis of that. And then,
what year was this approximately?
This was 2003.
2003, so pretty early.
Pretty early.
Ajax was
not a term yet.
Yeah.
And my co-founder Ross, I had two co-founders, Ross and Roland. They were both, pretty savvy engineers, and they basically came out and said, "Hey, you know what? We can make JavaScript in the browser much more powerful and richer." And so I started thinking about along those lines and what could we do. And we said, "Hey, email is something that everyone uses every day at the corporate level, and people are having fun with email on the consumer side of things. But why is it got to be so broken?" Because back then, the other problems of having a web browser versus a desktop is you got to dial into a VPN first and then fire up your Outlook before you can. But if you have a web browser, then HTTP flows through the tunnel, and then so there's a lot of different reasons why that worked. But back to his question, how did we come up with it? So with two independent thoughts. One was that in general, Outlook and Exchange were kind of broken, and that it was time to reimagine things for a newer platform We thought that was the web platform and the mobile platform. This was obviously before iPhone, but we were thinking about mobile IMAP and push IMAP and BlackBerry enterprise integration.
Wow.
So we're thinking about that, and then worrying about how to make the web experience so rich, drag and drop and all the. I still remember we launched at Web 2.0, and we did the launch the next day. We were re-invited to demo at the keynote. So Tim O'Reilly liked the demo so much, and he brought us back because it was the first time where someone looked at a web browser and said, "Shit, you can do things like this." There was the demo that we had where you could drag and drop things, and there was an address, and you can mouse over on the address, and a map will pop up, and it was really, really a rich interaction. More than rich, it was really fast. It was all on the web browser, and that solves a lot of security problems for the enterprise. And so it was a combination of the availability of JavaScript and the richness that it provided at that point in time, and the shift in mentality away from desktops to the web, and the erosion of the control of Microsoft, all kind of confluenced at the same time.
Yeah, that's cool.
So how did we pitch it? That was the other question he asked.
Yeah.
One of the things we went and pitched was, we said, look, email is a multi-billion dollar market, right? And there's a massive platform shift towards the web. And we're going to, even if we take some slice of that market, it's going to be significant. And, I think it helped a lot that there was, IMAX coming in back then, and so there was a lot of shift going on to the web, and we said, look at the web technologies that are coming in with the new version of JavaScript. And so we put it all together and convinced the VCs that the market is big and there's a disruption in the platform.
And so you raised the first round in 2003, 2004?
2003, yeah.
And like, what amount did you raise at that point? Like people don't
$4
understand.
million.
Yeah, that was like the first money in, right?
First money in was $4 million.
500K things.
And it was split between Benchmark and Redpoint. Yeah.
Not bad.
Yeah.
Not bad. That's great. And then how much did you raise over the life of the company?
20. I have to say 25 or something like that.
So 2 to 3 rounds, something like that.
3 rounds. We did 3 rounds. Yeah.
So like today, what do you think it would cost to do that same company? It's probably
it's interesting, right? To do the same tech in the company, you'll need far less capital.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But you probably go raise $100 million and just and you would go big. You go spend it. You would go that's how it is.
Crazy. All right. Well, hopefully, Michael, hopefully that helps a little bit. Let's move on. We got a question here from Brian in Chicago. How does a seed stage company get noticed by an investor like you? Is it a referral from one of our existing investors, the demo day, a press article? Could you give some examples of how you discovered some of the companies you invested in? Great question.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I think all 3 ways that he mentioned, demo days, press article, as well as referrals work. But the strongest source and the strongest signal is a referral from one of your angel networks. And the reason, and sometimes it's unfortunate that that's the case, but the reason that that's the case is that at the end, every investment is a people and a relationship. And I just tweeted out this yesterday when Chancellor Merkel said, the most important currency in the Greece crisis is lost, and that's the currency of trust. And that's so true in our field as well, and in venture capital, where everything is based on trust, right? I mean, the term sheet might say one thing or the other. No, the lawyers, argue with the term sheet about this and that. But at the end of the day, when a board meets together and there's trust between the CEO and the board, things work. And so I think to establish that trust, a referral coming in from a source that is our friend, establishes some of that trust, early on before the deal is made, and so that's important. Obviously, we go to, demo days. The problem with demo days is like you see 10 demos, and these are all exceptional entrepreneurs, and they're all equally compelling, and you don't, it's so much harder to stand out.
Yes.
Unless some investor comes in with, hey, I'm looking for this particular market and idea, and he happens to see one.
Right.
The hardest is, of course, reading a press article. I mean, I never read a press article and say, hey, let me go follow up on this, right? Usually that's already come by our desk, or, it's going to be really hard to do it that way.
So maybe give some examples from like Sonos. Were you a customer first?
Sonos,
that might be a different.
No, Sonos. So many of my examples are going to be different because it's all relationship. Sonos. I know John McFarlane, the founder and CEO of Sonos, as a personal friend for 20 years.
Okay.
So that was a different deal.
You guys worked together or something?
We worked together. Pure Storage, Scott Dietzen and I did Zimbra together.
Okay.
And he's the CEO of Pure Storage. So there's a lot of personal relationships that come into this.
What about?
If I talk about other things, let's talk about Coin, which it's a good example. That referral came from Manu, who's in K9 Ventures, and he said, hey, we were just catching up at lunch one time, and he was talking about, I said, hey, give me all the crazy ideas, give me far out crazy ideas that you guys are investing in, and talked about 5 or 6 of them, and talked about Coin, and said, hey, back up, that's interesting, I want to follow up, and so he introduced me. We built a relationship with Kanishk, and committed early on, to
like
invest.
As part of the seed round?
Part of the seed round.
Oh, okay.
We committed $500,000 just to, because we really believed that, and Coin was like a big, mess of a circuit with a card hanging at the end of it, and he was going to compress it all into this card that I have, that I carry now. Yeah. And we said, okay, I think if we can do that, that'll be interesting. And so we did that. So how did that happen? So referral came in from a really trusted source. Manu is really trusted. We're friends, and we know that he's not going, And then we established trust and relationship with the founder, and then that's how, the deal happened.
Got it. All right, good advice. I hope, Brian, that helps out a little bit. Let's do another one here. This one is from Pascal in San Ramon. What are the main advantages and disadvantages of an uncapped note versus a priced round? Which do you prefer? So this comes up all the time, and I actually go back and forth on it a little bit. I know some people have religion about we only do notes, or we only do priced rounds, or we don't do one or the other. So do you have a rule that you follow? Or
we don't have a rule.
Okay.
The reason we don't have a rule is all rules are, we've tried, when you see a deal, that establishes a new rule,
Yeah.
But in general, do we have thoughts on this? Absolutely. I think, an uncapped note is really, really unfair to the seed investors, right?
Absolutely.
And the reason why it is you're taking some money from the seed investor, and I mean, you got to think about the risk-reward curve. Why is Series A more expensive than seed? Why is Series B more expensive than Series A? And why are the growth guys investing at $1 billion while we're investing at 10 pre or 15 pre? The reason is the risk is being taken away at every stage, and the more de-risked it becomes, the higher the price. So now let's talk about seed. That's venture capital. So now let's talk about what you're doing with an uncapped note. With an uncapped note, you're taking all the risk at the seed level, but then if the deal works and it's a great product, then you pay the same price that a Series A investor pays.
Minus some discount, but
minus some discount, but
much.
That's 15% or whatever. That's right. Not what you really want is that if you're, and we don't play in the seed stage as much. I'm just and honestly, as a Series A investor, we don't actually care. In fact, as a VC, as a Series A investor, we kind of like uncapped notes because a lot of the cap table is not already taken.
I see.
And so there's no ownership struggle, And then there's the opposite problem where, we come into a Series A and, the seed, 50% of the company is already owned, right? And then that's bad too, So you want to find that right balance where the seed guys are rewarded for the risk that they took, and then there's enough for the Series A investors to play, and there's still enough for the founders in that pie.
So let's take an example at a similar valuation. Let's say like 6, cap note at 6 versus a priced round at, I don't know if it'd be 5 pre or 6 pre or something along those lines, raising $1 to $2 million. Do you have any advice for Pascal? Like which would be better or worse?
I think for the entrepreneur, I think the note is always better because then there is not enough. Then there is no legal costs and all of that stuff.
Yep.
But for the seed investor, again, I think a priced round is better because you're getting shares at this price and you have this many shares.
This
percentage. A lot of things happens, when the Series A happens because depending on the price and the post money, was the cap at the pre-money, what did you do with the option pool?
How long?
And all of this stuff happens. And so at the end, you don't have a clear view on what your real ownership is as a seed investor.
Yep.
And so I can understand seed guys saying, hey, I want to buy shares for that risk. But I think it's not that far off. An uncapped note is, in my opinion, on the side, the uncapped note is extremely entrepreneur friendly and
right.
and the priced round is seed friendly, and I think a capped note is somewhere in the middle.
Got it. Yeah, I don't know. Did you see the thing Brad Feld wrote yesterday or hear about it?
No, I haven't. Yeah, I heard about it, but I haven't read it.
So basically recapped, note, and that wiped out all of the existing seed investors except for the guy or I think it was a guy who was part of the original round, and he's stepping up and he's putting more money in, but basically wiping out everybody else.
Yeah, because you can wait for the term of the note and repay the note with interest, and boom, you're done all of a sudden.
Well, they just cleared him out. I mean, it was zero basically. I think they priced it at $100 pre or something. So that was bad, and Brad said, "Hey, we're not working with those people ever again, right?" So you pick your battles, but I go back and forth on it. I've done both, and actually there's some hidden stuff in the notes that ends up biting you a little bit depending on the time frame that it takes to go get it. So I don't know. Part of me says, just do the priced round, and everybody knows what they have. But I see the advantages of both. So you never know. All right, let's do one more before the thank yous to our sponsors. We have one here from Alice in New York City. What is your take on the Reddit situation? Does Redpoint do anything proactively to support female entrepreneurs? And this was a longer question with some thoughts about, there's so many things going on at Reddit, and if you don't want to talk about it, that's fine. But you guys are not investors, right?
Oh, no, we're not.
So what's your take as a, not necessarily the Redpoint point of view, but just from what you've been seeing?
Yeah, the Reddit situation is, I think the Reddit situation is completely different than the second question, just because Alan used to be the CEO of Reddit. I don't want to tie those two together.
Okay.
The Reddit situation, Reddit is a community site, and you got to always, once you have that, you got to always respect whom the community wants to work with and who they love, and you can't impose corporate you can't
edicts.
Edicts, and that's clearly when that happened, it backfired, and so that's the Reddit situation.
Yeah.
On the second question, it's cliche and needless to say, but obviously we need more, women's perspectives in venture and in entrepreneurship. I'm proud to say that I personally backed 2 female founders. One is Sarah Leary at Nextdoor. She's awesome. And then Madhura at Platform 9, which is an enterprise company that we backed in Series A that I led. So, and
that, I have to assume that was coincidence, right? Like
that was coincidence.
You weren't actively
we aren't actively looking for gender, race, or anything. Right? We're looking for
want
great ideas,
yeah,
great people.
Exactly.
And I mean, that's the beauty of the Valley, and yeah.
That's the part that I think the press sometimes gets wrong is, this Valley really is a meritocracy, and the best people, independent of any, where they're from, who they are, who they love,
Yes.
Anything else.
Absolutely.
If you're good at what you do, like there's
Yes.
going to be a job for you or a financing or whatever.
Yes.
And so, I think sometimes that gets lost. Like people are actively, excluding certain people of this category or that. And I mean, I've come across it a few times where there's some biases, but
I mean, you look. I mean, every industry has its biases, and the Valley has its biases. The venture and entrepreneurial community, everyone has their biases. But the question is, by and large, I mean, the people that, if you look at the community at large, I mean, is there a rampant, that the explicit thing that you see? I hope not. Obviously, people might have stories of their own, but I hope that that's not the case. And the Valley is more meritocracy, which is what I believe it is. So.
Great. All right. Well, let's take a moment, just relax for a minute, and we're gonna do some thank yous for our sponsors. We would not be able to do this show without the support we receive from our amazing sponsors. We have 4 for this season. They are Oric, Square One Bank, Accretive Solutions, and Ustream. And let me start off with Oric. Mitch Zuckley, who's the chairman over there, has been someone I've worked with many, many years over multiple companies, and just a great guy who's really pours his heart into what he does. And I always tell the companies and the founders that I'm working with that you want to get a great lawyer early in your company's formation, not just so that they can do the paperwork and the financing documents, whether it's a note or a priced round or whatever, or the employment agreements or partnerships or whatever. Of course they're going to do that. But beyond that, you want somebody who's going to be a great advisor, somebody who's seen so many different situations, many, many hirings and firings and financings and everything else that goes on. And they're going to be able to tell you, hey, Joe, this is not typical. You probably shouldn't ask for this kind of crazy thing in this document. Or this is more standard. We've seen 5 of these in the last month, and so that seems to be the way this is going. That question of cap notes versus price financings earlier, same sort of thing. So you want to get a great advisor who can help you out. Oric does a really great job with entrepreneurs I know who have worked with them. And you can go check them out on their website and find out more. It is oric.com. Next, I want to thank our sponsor, Square One Bank. And I've been working with the team over there as well for many years, Sam Bomick and Lori Lumenti-Gardi. And when you have a financial partner, of course they're going to do the basics like take care of the money and make sure it's safe. When Satish writes you a big check for $10 million, you want to make sure it goes someplace, it doesn't go to Vegas with you. So that part, that's par for the course. What you want beyond that is help with some of the basic stuff. So things like online banking that really works, help with company credit cards for the management team or for the executives, whoever needs them and is charging a lot, so they're not accumulating personal debt on their credit cards just in case something goes wrong. You want to make sure you have access to those sorts of services. So the team over there is great. They can work with you to set up all these things. You can find out more at their website. It is squareonebank.com. It's square and the number 1 bank.com. Also this season we have Accretive Solutions, and they are the leading business outsourcing firm in Silicon Valley. And Martini Niganal is the person I've worked with there as my interim CFO. And if you don't know what business outsourcing is, it's basically take your finance function, payroll, making sure that the bills are getting paid, accounts receivable, accounts payable, anything related to finance, your board packages, which you want to distribute to your investors on a somewhat regular basis. all that sort of stuff. You as a CEO have limited cycles, and of course you could go do the payroll yourself if you wanted to, but trust me, that is not something you want to be doing. You want to outsource this very cost effectively. They can take care of this stuff for you. They can make sure that all the numbers are adding up correctly, and you can go focus on your product and your business and the major things that you need to be doing with your time, which is always in short supply. So go check them out. They're great to work with. Their website is as-bos.com. And then finally, I want to thank the team over at Ustream. Brad Hunstable, who's the CEO there, has been a supporter of the show from the very beginning. And we wouldn't be able to bring this to you without the support we get from those guys. If you're thinking about doing any live streaming, whether it be for a corporate event or maybe you want to do a show of some sort, you can find out more from them as well. Their streaming stuff is the best, and they do a great job on the customer service side as well. You can find out more at their website, which is ustream.tv. And that's it for commercials. So let's dive back into the questions. Once again, if you want to reach us, you can try us on email, help@founderline.com. And you can also reach us on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @FounderLine. So we've got one here from TJ in San Francisco. What are the characteristics of the most successful founders you've worked with? Any patterns? What do you think?
For sure there are patterns.
They're all crazy.
They're all crazy. They're all thinking that they could do things that you would say, well, that's not possible. And they're still trying to do it.
Like Kanishk said, I have this big mess.
Yeah, I'm going to make it into a small card.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or they're taking on big, huge giants and they're going up against it. And they're like, hey, I'm going to go after IBM or Microsoft or Apple or whatever. And you're being, and they really believe it. So there's that. They're really, really driven people. You can tell they're competitive, they're driven. That's usually a quality you see,
How does that come across, like in the pitch meetings? Like, can you just smell it somehow, or?
Yeah. You can absolutely smell it. I mean, everything from the way they deal with you, the way they're positioning everything, and typically they're also able to attract other great people to come and work alongside them. Successful founders in any event are definitely able to do that.
Yep.
And so that is, roughly like leadership or the founder charm or whatever it is, that they're able to bring people, hire all these people to come and work for them and follow them with their crazy idea. And you're like, okay, you had a crazy idea, but then you got all these smart people to come and join you, executing on this crazy idea.
Yep.
That has a 9 in 10 chance of failure.
Yep.
So yeah.
Sounds good. All right, TJ. Hope that helps. Let's go to this one's from Mikey in New York City. Given that the best investments are often non-consensus in nature, how do you keep an open mind when deciding on an investment before rushing into your initial instincts?
Well, that's a great question. It's a really tough one, and the only way you get that is through experience in the business, right? When you've seen all of the tweets and things about people turning down big, because when you turn down a Twitter or a Facebook and you live with that, then the next time you see a company and there's like 99 reasons for every deal, and especially great ones like he rightly says, there are 99 reasons why it won't work and one reason that it will. And you want to not be unaware of the 99 reasons. You want to be aware of the 99 reasons. You want to internalize them. You want to say, yeah, I'm okay with those 99 reasons why this will fail. And we're not in the bank business. We're in the venture capital business. We're taking risk. And if 9 out of, one of the things that if all your deals are doing well, then guess what? You're not taking enough risk. Then, if you construct a fund where all your deals succeed, then I bet you your fund will be like a 1x or a 2x fund. If you want that 3x, 5x, 10x, fund, then a lot of your deals have to fail because then you're taking enough risks as that other deals bring you that 10x. And so, so once you've seen the movie before, then you have that. And then what we do, at Redpoint, we allow people's conviction, gut, and passion to take precedence over a majority or a consensus vote.
Wow.
And so a lot of good venture capital firms follow that.
So to be specific, like let's say there was something crazy that you really wanted to do, but a majority of the other partners thought that was not a good idea.
It would happen.
You can still write that check.
You can still write the check.
But
no. It's just basically your partners are there to help you think through the tough questions, ask you the probing questions, ask you questions that will keep you sleepless at night. And despite that, if your gut is still saying, God, there's something here, then you want to encourage that. Because that's what venture capital is all about.
I've heard people say that the best deals are the ones where there's the most contention around it.
No doubt. No doubt.
Like, oh, that's crazy. No way.
That's true, and I think that's true in every firm. Yeah.
All right, great. Well, I always I'm just fascinated by firm dynamics, right? And every partnership is slightly different.
Right.
I know some are more highly political, others less so. And you have to decide, hey, do I want to lay down across the tracks because next time that guy's going to get even with me or whatever. So hopefully that's not the case with you guys.
That's absolutely not the case, and that's the reason why I guess I survived in the business for this long is because of the culture that we have.
Yeah, that's great. All right, awesome. Thank you for the question, Mikey. Let's move on here. This one is from Tommy in Palo Alto. How did you handle disagreements between founding teams when you were working in startups and now that you are an investor? Please give specific examples. Thanks.
Yep.
So there's always disagreements between founders. So maybe walk through some examples back when you were
when you were a founder.
Yeah.
So our founding team. I don't know whether this example. Maybe it works in. We were friends for a long time.
Which one are you talking about? Zimbra?
Zimbra, yeah.
Okay.
There were lots of disagreements. When we signed a customer that eventually ended up being a $20 million customer to us, but had so many requirements that the entire founding team, excepting for me, were literally livid that we would even be talking to the customer and that we shouldn't even be doing this.
Just because it was going to take too much time to do all this custom stuff or
and it's
whatever.
distraction, right? It's huge distraction, which it was.
I see.
At the end of the day, the CEO of the company should be able to make decisions that are hugely unpopular with the founders, and the founders, at the end of the day, can spend like 2 days vetting it and saying how stupid it is and how crazy it is. But once the decision is made, that the culture is such that everyone embraces the decision and tries to make the decision successful. So there's no political moves like, hey, I want this decision to fail because I was against it and I said I was going against it. And the CEO basically said, we're going to go this way.
Yeah. So actively working behind the scenes to support their
instead of undermining the decision, work to make the decision successful. And that's what happened in our case. It was a hugely unpopular decision. I was the CEO then, and I made the decision to go for it. And it was a lot of painful, sleepless nights for them. But that's why startups win and lose as a team. But they spent those sleepless nights making the customer successful, and that turned out to be, a huge deal for us. We went cash flow break even, because of which we could entertain M&A offers at our pace and at our terms,
That's
and
huge.
when we wanted to, when
Yeah.
we went cash flow break even. And so all of that happened, but it wouldn't have happened if these guys hadn't supported the decision. So how do founding teams work? Well, you got to fight, and you got to ask each other the tough questions. You got to challenge each other. You got to walk out of the room and do all of that stuff. But at the end of the day, when the team decision is made, you do whatever is possible to make that successful.
And your guys, in that case, did that.
Absolutely.
How did you? I'm really curious about this because I've been through this as well. How did you present the decision to them? Obviously you had been debating it for probably weeks at that point, on and off, as the opportunity came on. So eventually you went back to them and said, "Hey, look, guys, I know you disagree, but
yeah, look,
here's why."
Here's why. So basically, the way I said it is, look, I'm looking at it not just from the product angle and the market angle. I'm looking at it from capitalization. I'm looking at it from, how the company looks a year from now, what this does to the strategy of our company, and
Presumably it was a marquee customer, right? Like a name you could use with everybody else.
top 25, top 50, top 25.
Yeah.
Fortune 25, So, at the end of the day, I said, look, as the CEO, I'm saying that this is the right thing for the company to do, and I would love for you guys to support me in this decision. Sleep over it, and so that's how we did it.
Awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
And that's how you know you have a good team, right?
Oh,
Is
yeah, absolutely.
those-
And they all came in and said, I wish you're right. I think you're doing the wrong thing, but we're going to support you.
Good. And
Yeah.
you probably paid for it somewhere down the line.
Oh, yeah.
But that's awesome. That's great. That's great leadership. All right, Tommy, hope that is helpful. Let's move on here. This one is from Rick in Mountain View. The hiring of Andy Rubin at Redpoint was coupled with the news that he received $48 million to invest in his hardware playground. Is the $48 million from Redpoint? Does it go into their fund or something else? What kinds of hardware is he going to invest in? So the news here is that I think in the spring, Andy became a venture partner at Redpoint,
That's right.
after leaving Google.
That's right.
And then started this company called, is it called Playground?
Correct.
And you guys funded Playground? Is
Correct.
that how it worked?
Yeah. So Andy and us have a long relationship. Andy was the founder of Hip Top, Sidekick, right, which was the first smartphone ever made.
Danger.
Yeah, I couldn't remember. Danger, made the first smartphone, right? It had a cloud-based service, apps that you can download, all of the things that, that you see in the modern smartphone.
I'm just telling you, my producer Joel right now is really excited because that's like his favorite smartphone ever. So keep going.
Yeah. So, and only a guy like Andy can do this, right? And so he did that. Obviously, ironically, sold it to Microsoft. So Microsoft was the owner of the first smartphone, and
they've owned many smartphones over the years, apparently.
Yeah. But then was involved with a couple of other Redpoint companies, Web TV, and Android was the third company that he did. Curiously and ironically, he and I were EIRs at Redpoint together, 2003, because he was incubating Android at that point.
Oh, and you were doing Zimbra at the same time.
I was doing Zimbra. We were just, back then, Andy would come up with all these ideas where he would have a camera, he hacked a camera to have a GPS on top of it, and so wherever he would take a picture, the picture would say, oh, this was at Cowper in Hamilton, and things like that. Back in 2003, so geotagged photos.
Wow.
He was, and obviously a guy well beyond his, well beyond time in terms of his way of thinking.
Yeah.
And we were lucky to have the special relationship and bond that we had together. And we were always saying that whenever he does his next thing, he would do it with us. And he would, it was just a great fit when he came back from Google. So Playground is a hardware incubator. I mean, his office is, I'll wait for him to launch Playground. It would be unfair of me to launch Playground without what he's talking about.
It's not announced yet.
It's announced, but not in its entirety. But it's going to be a huge hardware incubator where it's going to be everything you can possibly imagine to conceptualize, design, and manufacture hardware products, complex hardware products. I mean, when he's building all the building blocks, the Wi-Fi module and the Bluetooth module and everything, and we're off to a great start already. Playground has, a funding structure that is not fully disclosed yet, and the amount and the size and all that. We're the only thing that we've said is that we're investors and we're the only venture investors. Everyone else is strategic.
Yeah. Well, and some of those are in the news. I don't know if they've been announced by you guys or just rumors, but big companies.
You can read the news, and
yeah.
it's all. I mean, this is Andy Rubin, so he can,
So is he investing as well, or?
Yeah. He's been really, really good. Actually. An investment that I just led that I can't talk about yet. We brought Andy in as well, and he also invested, and he's going to help the company. And it was great to have him around the table. It was a hardware company, and it was a really competitive deal, and it helps us to have Andy there too.
Cool. Awesome.
Deals.
All right. Well, that's hopefully that helps Rick with his questions. Let's move on here. We have one from AJ in Toronto. What should one do when having a hard time finding co-founders with the right skill sets? So I don't know if AJ is the technical person or maybe the business person, or it could be either way.
There's a lot of, it's almost like asking, how do we find your spouse, right?
Yeah.
It's as difficult a question as that. The best ways I can think of is to go work your network. So it's someone that you trust refers you to someone that they trust, versus there's a lot of ways in which you can go randomize it. There are all these different ways you can find people on the internet, and
search on LinkedIn
and connect and all that.
Sounds similar to the way deals get referred to.
Deals get referred to, yeah.
Same thing.
It's so hard, founders are all type A personalities, and finding one or two or three that can work well together, understand each other, as well as, nominate a CEO and defer the ultimate decision-making authority to the CEO, like we talked about. All of those dynamics, they're really hard to find. And so I would, if you can't find someone in your own network, then I would go one removed from your network, but someone that you know and trust says, hey, I worked with Joe before, and he's got these weaknesses and these strengths, and going in that's who you're going to deal with.
Stay away from that Joe guy.
Yeah, I would stay away from the Joe guy.
That's you guys. That's like Redpoint rule number 6, isn't it? No, I agree. It's really hard, right? And just that marriage, because it is a marriage, and usually it's at least 2, sometimes 4, people who are involved. You might end up losing one of those along the way, out of, for whatever reason, life reason, somebody going through a divorce, or, they decide to move back to the East Coast or whatever. So that's a really hard thing. But when you get it right, And it sounds like Zimbra was one of those cases.
Yeah,
like it was so
it's
great.
awesome. Yeah.
Same in multiple of my companies where
Yeah.
you're just finishing each other's sentences.
Yeah, it's
you're
perfect.
compensating for weaknesses.
Yeah, I mean, like Scott Dietzen with Zimbra, and now he goes and becomes the CEO of Pure, and I'm just along for the ride, and I don't even have to worry about what he does there because I know he is who he is, and he's going to kill it there. So
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, here's another one. This one is from Summit in San Francisco. Once you invest, how do you work with an underperforming team to improve their performance? What specific things do you say or do? So that's a great question. I saw something in the last couple of days talking about your mood as an investor is as low as your lowest company, right? Like that's
no doubt.
Your stress level or whatever. So
no doubt.
So what do you do? Somebody's not performing. You're obviously not the CEO, so you can't jump in there and start doing stuff.
I think the big thing there is actually the same qualities that you would need to be a successful leader and a CEO. I mean, if you think about the progression of a manager to a senior manager to a director to a VP to a CEO, you're relinquishing control at each time, and rather than doing things yourself, you're trying to help other people do things. And if you're a CEO and if your VP of marketing is not performing, it's the same issue as you're a VC and your CEO and your team is not performing. So what do I mean by that? I think everyone has different ways of dealing. I think the best way and the most successful CEOs are trying to coach people and help them succeed and help them learn, but are also acutely aware, are also judging them, at the same time on whether there is a progression or whether there is, hey, you know what? You're great at A, B, and C, but you're just not cut out to do X, Y, and Z. And so let's find something for you in the company where you will succeed and where you will perform at your best. And great teams and great founding teams want the company to be successful, and they're like, okay, I want to do that. So the way to do that is in a way to coach them rather than lecture them or yell at them, or that doesn't work. So you got to figure out how best to help them succeed and improve their trajectory. And if that means getting a mentor or a coach or saying, okay, here are 5 things that stop focusing on everything else. The next board meeting, here are just these 5 things. Just report on these 5 things, and that's all that matters in this company. And it might be different 5 things for different people, different companies, different stages. Maybe for this company, it's like, okay, it's what's most important. And then allow them to help them narrow and focus and see if that helps. And, then there are mentors, and you help coach them. Other things, you help hire people around them. We a lot of times say, okay, hey, let's hire people around this area where, there's weakness.
To compensate for something that's missing.
All
right, great advice. We got 1 minute left for a quick one. Matt in Mill Valley. It seems there are way too many startups and not enough great employees to go around. Would a correction that culled some weaker startups be a net positive in the long run? What do you think?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, there are 2 things going on. There's lots of capital. Everyone can get seed funded, right?
Yeah.
And then the Valley, which is a good thing, is breeding a lot of companies. And so, but people talk about the Series A crunch, and the reason why there's a Series A crunch is the Series A is pretty healthy. So much capital has increased in maybe 2-fold, and I don't know the exact numbers in the Series A stage, but the seed spectrum has grown 100,000-fold.
Yeah.
And so, the signal to noise ratio has dropped dramatically at the A level. And so, is that sustainable? I don't think it's sustainable in the long run. I think there's going to be some consolidation in in the seed stage. And you see that happening. I mean, the exuberance from 3 years ago, even at the Series A level, is now like, hey, you don't want to seed every company that comes your way. Before
Right.
it was like
Everything.
yeah.
All right, great. Well, we're out of time, unfortunately. Thank you for doing such a great job.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You can follow Satish on Twitter. His handle is Satish D, SATISHD, and his firm is at Redpoint VC. So follow him and follow his firm. Thank you once again to our fantastic sponsors, Oric, Square One Bank, Accretive Solutions, and Ustream. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Our handle is at FounderLine. You can tweet to us there. You can send us questions in advance to help@founderline.com. You can go to the website and read about upcoming guests, watch the previous episodes, and also subscribe to our podcast on iTunes. Thanks for watching. Here's to the crazy ones, and we'll see you again next time.